Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. I'm your host Mark Philpott and I hope you're all having a beautiful day no matter where you are in the world today. If you're a regular listener to the show, welcome back. It's great to have you here, and it's also very nice to know that there are people all over the world listening to the show on a regular basis. If it's your first time with us, welcome. It's great to have you on board, and I would love to know how you actually came across the show. So if you've got a moment to spare, can you drop me a note on social media and let me know how you found out about the Global Travel Channel podcast show? Maybe a friend told you, maybe you just stumbled across our website, or you found us on social media. I would love to know. Okay, let's get on with today's show. I've got another amazing intrepid traveller to speak with. His name is Charlie Stamp. Charlie, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show.
Hi Mark, thank you very much for inviting me on.
Now, I actually invited you on last week, but you were a little bit crook. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, not too bad. I think it's just the aircon. We're using it for heating at the moment, so it's got my throat going a bit crazy, but we'll get through it. Hey?
You wouldn't be the last Englishman to miss an appointment, would you?
Don't know what you mean.
Whereabouts in the world are you talking to me from today?
So right now we're renting a little apartment on the Mediterranean coast in Spain. It's just south of Alicante, and we've actually got a lagoon on one side, and on the other side is the sea. So we've got a lot of beaches on one side, so it's a great place to stay for the winter.
You're surrounded by water by the sound of it.
Yeah, it was a little bit scary the other few days when we had Storm Gloria coming through Spain, and it's one of the worst storms they've had in years. So we were clinging on to everything, but we're doing all right. The sea's back to normal, so it's good.
Have you ever been on a podcast show before?
Yeah, I did. Probably around about a year ago. There was one about sort of living and working in different countries and being a digital nomad. So yeah, one or two shows I've been on, and I used to actually run a radio station at a children's hospital. So
there you go.
I mean, I'm used to yabbering away on a microphone. It's fine.
I'm talking to a seasoned pro then. That's good to know. What kind of stuff did you talk to the children about on a radio station in the hospital?
Just whatever they wanted to talk about, really. You weren't really in control of the show, so obviously you were there for them to try and take their mind off the fact they're in hospital and what's going on with them. So yeah, be there for the parents and the kids, and it was great fun. You know, one minute we'd be playing pop music, and the next minute you'd play Humpty Dumpty. It was all a bit crazy, but great fun.
That sounds like a fantastic idea, actually. I haven't heard of radio stations being in hospitals too much before. Yeah,
we've got some over there in Australia. I think it's maybe in Sydney and Melbourne. It's called Radio Lollipop, and they've got stations all over the world. So I was very lucky. I used to run the one in Great Ormond Street in London, which is one of the world's biggest children's hospitals. Only for children, and it was a fantastic thing to do.
Brilliant. Well, here's a big shout out to anybody that's listened to Radio Lollipop before. That gives me some ideas on changing the name of my podcast show, actually. So what do you think of the whole podcasting? Like, when you're traveling around, do you listen to podcasts? Is it something that you tune into, or not really? Or
I absolutely love them. Yeah, I totally. It's just one of the best things when you're traveling, because especially, you're on like a sleeper bus or a really long train journey or something like that. It's just really good to learn things, be entertained. There's a few really good comedy podcasts that I enjoy as well. So it's just different. You don't always want to listen to music. So they're fantastic.
And one of the things I do for all of my guests that come on the show is I give you the opportunity to actually dedicate your episode to someone special in your life. So who would you like to dedicate this episode to today?
There's no doubt it's got to be family. Sorry, it's old but boring. But yeah, first off, it's definitely got to be my wife, because without her, I couldn't. Well, we couldn't be doing what we're doing. Like the two of us, basically, traveling all over the place together, and writing the blog. And I'll be honest, I'm not the best person at getting up in the morning, and she's always there to motivate me, get me a cup of tea, and get me out of bed. And yeah, she's been a rock to me. So I'd like to dedicate it to her, definitely. And just a sneaky another one would be my father and mum as well, because back like early last year, I converted a builder's van into a mobile home, which we're living in part time now. And yeah, my dad was, well, both of them, they were a massive help in doing that. So I went back and lived with them for 3 months, which I didn't think I'd do at the age of 40. Yeah, this goes out to them as well.
Fantastic. So now let's put some names behind those three, because you didn't mention anyone's name. So your wife's name's Christina, if I got that right.
How do you know that? Yeah, that's correct.
But I don't know your parents' names. So what are your parents' names?
It's the lovely Brenda and John.
Brenda and John.
Brenda and John, back in Cambridgeshire in the UK. So I'm sure they'll be listening to this as proud parents. So shout out to them.
Fantastic. So I asked you for a special person. You gave me 3 special people. So we'll make a dedication to the 3 of them. Now, before we get on talking about your blog, because your blog, the name of your blog is maptrotting.com, and you do this with your wife, Christina, as you just mentioned. But I'd like to go back to the beginning and kind of find out your roots as far as travel, because you were born in the UK and you had some pretty interesting family holidays when you were young, didn't you? So how about you tell us about some of those experiences when you first went off traveling with your family?
Yeah, it's I used to really love it. I mean, probably like back in the 80s, you know, when I was up to the age of about 10 or 11, we go on these regular family holidays in England and Wales and even Scotland. And I've got these fairly vague memories of basically just being wet quite a lot, getting absolutely soaked. And my dad at the time, he had this trailer tent. For anyone that's not familiar, you get like literally a little box trailer that goes on the back of a car. And then when you park up on the campsite, you take the lid off this thing and it like pulls open into a massive tent. It's all a little bit Harry Potter. And so this thing, my memories of childhood family holidays are basically putting this thing up in the rain, taking it down in the rain, and going for walks in the rain. So yeah, that's kind of the sort of Englishman holiday. But through doing that, I mean, we went to some amazing places. And very often, even now when we're back in the UK, me and Christina will sort of drive somewhere and I'll get this weird deja vu and I'll be like, hey, I've been here before, because we visited so many places, stately homes, museums, attractions in the UK as a child that, yeah, I think I've got it pretty well covered. So that must be where the love of travel comes from.
I was going to ask you, actually, are there any particular trips that you can remember when you were real small that kind of stuck in your mind for whatever reason? It might have been something crazy that happened on the trip, or you got wetter than one time before, or
yeah, I don't know which one wins in terms of the weather, but it was definitely a few trips to, it was the Lake District area, and I think there was one trip to Scotland where we would just rent a cottage in a small village, and there'd be like a river nearby. And to me, this was just incredible. It was amazing, and all around there'd be like hills and mountains. And I grew up in the east of England, and for anybody that knows that area, it's called the Fens or Fenland, and it is absolutely flat. You know, it's like the Aussie outback. It's just, you can see from one horizon to the other, and there's not even a bump there. So to go to these other places in the UK where there's more sort of mountains and hills, that really sticks in my mind.
Were you a Boy Scout?
No, I don't, and I don't know why really. I look back on it and I'm like, I would have loved that stuff, but and I had a friend that was, but he always used to tell me these horrific stories of going camping in these like crazy old fabric tents that they used to have, like really heavy cloth tents. So he never really made it sound very appealing, but I would have loved to get out there and light fires and cook rabbits and all that.
So your parents didn't let you cook any rabbits on the barbecue at night?
No, we probably had one or two fires, but yeah, nothing quite that wild. You know, we used to go camping, but it was always on sites with facilities and stuff. So yeah, it wasn't too wild. So I'm living that now instead.
Mm. So how much time went by before you ventured off by yourself without your family around to go on an overseas trip? How old were you for the first time when you went overseas?
Good question. I think I was 17 actually. This yeah, it was a funny little trip where me and a friend at the time we booked a very cheap package holiday to Croatia, and this would have been, I think, in like 1997. You know, where if you said to Croatia to anybody, they'd still be like, "Oh, is there a war going on or not?" Or you know, it was it was thought to be like a kind of quite an out there place to go, but obviously this is what people think when they don't travel, and then when you get there, you're like, well, there's lovely hotels and all this kind of thing. But me and my friend, we were about 17, 18, and we went on this holiday thinking we were going to have a real adventure, and just ended up on a package holiday, did a load of coach trips with some pensioners, and we made the best of it, but we were probably the youngest people there by about 50 years. And then to kind of cap it all, my friend, at some point he got bitten by an insect on the side of his head. And I just remember coming down to breakfast and he sat opposite me and he had this massive lump on the side of his head, and there was like stuff weeping out of it. It was quite horrible really, and that put me off my eggs. And we sort of, obviously we're out there on our own, you know, we're quite scared, so we tell the holiday rep about this, and we end up going to the local hospital, which was quite an experience. And you know, she couldn't really speak like the local language, so he had to be taken into this room, and he had an injection in his buttocks, and it was it was kind of a unique first travel experience.
Did he survive?
Oh yeah, I think he's still alive and kicking. Yeah, the bite went down. He didn't have like any crazy infection or anything.
Lucky it wasn't in Australia. He could have died within minutes.
That's it. Yeah, it wasn't a redback.
So was that the trip that kind of gave you a real appetite to go out there and travel more after you, even though you did that with a group of pensioners? Was it something you kind of got home from and kind of thought, yeah, I love this travel thing. I want to get out there and see the world. Did it happen for you then?
I think what really kicked it off is when I was at university, between when was it? Between the first year and the second year of studying, as you obviously get these long summer holidays, like 3 months or so, and I applied for a job with a company called Eurocamp, and I'd been on a few of these holidays as a child, into Europe, and been to places like Austria and Switzerland, and so basically they have all these caravans and tents already set up on campsites across Europe. And then you just go and stay in them. So it's like camping, but without any of the hassle of putting the tent up in the rain. So I applied for a job, and I was a rep for Eurocamp, and I worked in a tiny German village called Bad Liebenzell in the Black Forest. And it was just absolutely fantastic. I loved it. I had a great summer, and I was kind of there living outdoors. And we got to know the local area. And I think from then, once I went back to the UK into a more regular pattern, I was like, no, I want to get out there and see more of the world. So I'd say that's really what kicked it off, rather than the Croatia coach tour. But
You didn't want to do pensioner tours down the Rhine or anything after you got back from there?
No, I'm probably heading that way now, but not at the time.
Right, well, we're going to fast forward now to 2009, and you met someone in London who would end up changing your life, basically. So tell us how that story unfolded.
Yeah, it's funnily enough to tie in with the whole thing. Well, we first met in a tourist information centre, uh, but it's not as weird as it seems because I did used to work there, and a good friend of mine who I worked with at the tourist office said, "Oh, I've got this friend who she sort of came in sometimes, and they'd meet up for lunch, and then obviously we saw each other and went to sort of hang out a couple of times, and then as these things do, it just went from there. So yeah, it was the tourist office in central London that first sparked the romance. So Christina is from Lithuania.
Lithuania, right, okay. So she was working over in London at the time.
Yeah, she'd actually lived there. Her and her friend came over, like when they were in their very early 20s. So yeah, she'd actually worked there for several years before we met.
So you guys got together and you started doing short trips to start off with? You did weekend stuff and long weekend stuff and started to see parts of the UK together?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, we were in a very fortunate situation. The apartment we lived in, the neighbours had this car, and it was, it sounds really silly when I say it now, but it's the girl that lived upstairs had a car which she purchased to learn to drive, but she couldn't actually. Well, she'd never passed her test, and she didn't really drive very well. So she said to me, "Well, you look after the car, and you can use it as much as you like, as long as you maintain it, so it doesn't just sit there." So this was perfect for us. So we had a good sort of 2, 3, maybe 4 years where we were using this poor little car, and we absolutely abused it. We went to Wales and to the north of England, and yeah, it seemed like every kind of second weekend we were taking these trips out of London, and it actually got to the point where we said, well, "What's the point in living in London?" Because we were just enjoying so much of the rest of the UK that yeah, we couldn't wait to escape at weekends.
Now you started your first travel blog was called Little Trot, is that right?
That was actually because we were doing these trips, and sometimes we'd just jump on the train as well from London and go and see somewhere just outside the suburbs or around the M25. And we started doing these trips quite often. So Christina started a blog, so it was actually hers to begin with, before I came along and stole it, and we kind of shared it. But yeah, she started a blog just on WordPress, and it was just called Little Trot because we were going out on these little weekend adventures, and it was around this time that she also got into photography. So got one of her sort of first proper cameras rather than using a smartphone. So we'd go on these excursions, and then she'd love taking the photos. So the kind of blog went along with that. And it also, I often forget this because she speaks perfect English now, but at the time, it was really helping with her kind of writing and everything. So yeah, it was all good.
Was there any kind of vision in the early days that it was going to turn into something big like it is now? Was there a plan at the beginning, or did it just naturally evolve?
No, it just naturally evolved. To start with, I mean, I had nothing to do with it. I sort of helped maybe a little bit from the point of view of the themes and HTML and the geeky stuff behind the scenes. But yeah, it was literally just her hobby, and she really enjoyed doing that, keeping this blog, and shared it amongst friends, but it was never really to get views or to get traffic. And then after a little while of doing it, once she'd written a few posts about very specific things and attractions, we realised people were finding this stuff, and they were starting to look at it.
If someone was actually about to start a travel blog today, what would be a couple of tips of advice you'd give them in today's environment versus way back when you started yours?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because way back when we started our travel blog, we were thinking, well, we're already a bit late to this, because we were looking at people like Nomadic Matt and Goats on the Road, and these other travel bloggers who are, still doing their thing these days, and they're huge. They're the top of the game. But there is always, what I would say is there is always space for more travel blogs and more information if it's done in the right way. I think the problem is if you try and be too generic, then you might not, you're really going to struggle. You might not really get anywhere. So I would say, well, at least kind of pick a sort of theme or something that you're really interested in, and then kind of live that through the blog. So like we're interested in maybe going to places which are more likely to be listed on Atlas Obscura than they would be on, let's say, Culture Trip or something like that, more of a regular travel site. So we try and seek those out, and we find that the posts that we write about really specific things actually do better in terms of like the ranking and people finding them. Because I think with the way the internet's evolved and the way people search, they now search for really, really sort of more specific articles and places and things like that.
So your first piece of advice to somebody who's starting off on the travel blogging world would be to really have a niche within the travel industry. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be completely honest. I think it's something we, between me and Christina, we've always sort of struggled a little bit. And we've actually changed a couple of times from where we thought we were thinking our focus is to kind of where we've got today. And we're actually sort of pivoting towards, now we're going to help people build a travel lifestyle. So for people that want to more sort of travel full time or balance, kind of more travel with their career, we're going to try and help those people with what we're doing. But we're just building content behind the scenes around that at the moment, and then that's going to be like our sort of 2020 focus. So I think, despite what I've just said, I don't think you sort of need to worry too much from the outset. The main thing is just to start blogging and to start doing things, and then you can work it out. I mean, things like, let's say, domain name, everything like that, it's actually quite hard to change that if your blog is doing well. But pretty much everything else, you can change. Obviously, you can change the theme and the layout, but you can change the focus very gradually of your blog as well. So I wouldn't kind of go like too crazy on mapping out absolutely everything. I think the sort of second piece of advice would be, well, maybe have a name that's sort of generic enough. So we didn't call our blog like Charlie and Christina Go Travelling, because then if we stop travelling, the blog can still live on as Map Trotting. So somebody else can write for Map Trotting, or maybe it could be used in a different way. So if you make it too specific, then also that could be a negative. So yeah, go for a name which is a little more generic and can be applied to anything.
How did you come up with the name Map Trotting?
There's no amazing story behind that, I'm afraid. So, but it
Make
was,
one up.
Yeah. So we were in the Himalayas, and
we just got to the top of Everest, and I planted the flag, and I said to my wife Christina, "Look,
yeah, we've got to trot the map." It was, and I recommend this method to anybody that's struggling to, because I think people focus too much on blog names, and they come up with often very boring ones. So something that's a little bit different. But what I usually do to come up with a name is I'll just have a piece of paper, and I'll just write some words that I like. And we had this sort of whole thing, because the blog was called Little Trot to start with. We thought, well, we want the like the sort of heritage of that. And I absolutely love maps. I'm just crazy about maps. And I thought, well, if we go map trotting, then we're trotting around the map. So so I'd literally written down, I think, trot, walk, hike, and then I'd written down, map, travel, all these different words, and then you kind of like smash them together and see what works. So I would go with that method, and I wouldn't focus too much on, you don't have to worry like who's behind the blog, because we see it's kind of a joke between us that we see so many blogs that have the number 2 in the title, and if you put a number, that's often a, if you say the domain name, it's like, oh, is it a digit or is it the word, or it can get a bit too confusing.
Yeah, right. So based on those tips you just shared, if you were to go back and start all over again, what would you do differently?
From starting the blog in a kind of serious way, because I don't regret the sort of way it began was really nice with the sort of hobby blog, and you just kind of like seeing what works at the time, so you're just trying stuff out. But I would go more to researching keywords and finding out what people actually want. What are they searching for? So a good example of this, because some of our kind of success has come purely by luck. So during our Southeast Asia trip, we took a sleeper train from Hanoi to Sapa. So now we're one of the top ranking posts for that journey. So if you Google Hanoi to Sapa sleeper train, or Hanoi to Sapa train, whatever, then we're coming up quite high for that. But there is no way that we actually sat down and said, oh, what do you think people are looking for? It just happened to be that we looked for it, we took the journey, then we wrote the post, and good fortune has put that post higher up. But now we know about SEO, keywords, all the kind of dull stuff that you have to do behind the scenes. Then that's kind of leading our content now more than it ever has.
Looking back to when you started, what was the hardest thing that you found about starting the blog or taking it into its new evolution, so to speak?
It was probably where to start, really, I think, Mark. It was like, well, what do we do? I think you can quickly become overwhelmed, because if you're used to working for a business of any size, then you're like, okay, well, there's that person, they do the marketing, and there's that person that does accounts, and and then you kind of strike out on your own, and you have this website, and suddenly you think, oh, it's a big serious business, so therefore I need to do I've got to do the social media, but I've got to write all these posts, but I've got to take all these photos, and it can very quickly become overwhelming. So I think my main advice would be, well, just focus on a few basic things. Primarily, really, the content, because without the content, you don't have anything. And I think the real trap people fall into these days is they can get a bit obsessed with the social media side, because social media is like quick, cheap, and easy. It's like, oh, well, if I post loads of stuff on Facebook, then I'm just going to get my traffic from that. And really, you want to be thinking long term, and building up like content people are actually going to want to read, and content people will find when they search for it. So yeah, if you're going to do social media, maybe pick 1 or 2 channels and focus purely on that. Maybe you love Instagram. Okay, do Instagram, but do the blog as well. Don't worry about Twitter and Facebook and whatever else, because you can do all that stuff later, or when you get bigger, you can employ somebody else to do it. It's not, don't have to do everything from the start. That's what I'm saying.
How do you and Christina split the duties of running your blog today versus when you started it? Like you mentioned before that Christina was doing most of the writing and everything, but how do the duties kind of get split up these days?
Yeah, that's kind of been a slow evolution, and we did get to a point where we were like, well, hang on, you're good at this, I'm good at this. So let's actually split it, because I'll be honest, at the beginning when we started it as Map Trotting, we were both, trying to do everything, like writing the content, both of us, and doing various things. So the simple answer is that we kind of went towards where our skills are. So mine is more kind of the technical stuff, And I do really enjoy writing as well. So we both write, but I'll do more of the theme, and I'll do more the kind of pages about how to start a blog, how to earn money online, and if you want the kind of more technical geeky posts, that's just me. And then Christina will do the stuff on the destination side of it as well, and the photography. All the photos on there are hers because she's become an amazing photographer through doing this. So it's kind of divided like that, and then in the background there's things like Pinterest. That's totally Christina's. I wouldn't know where to start with that. And then something like Twitter. I'm more into Twitter, so I will do that, and I'll keep that running. So it's just a sort of division of tasks of where our skills are. But at the same time, now we're looking to the future. It's like, well, okay, if we were going to hand that to somebody else, what would we give them? So like Pinterest, for example, there's a lot of sort of manual work involved in that, which is quite laborious. So that would be easy to outsource that to somebody.
Mm. What would you say your relationship's like with social media today?
For me, well, actually, I think both of us, we've had a bit of a revelation, really, over time. And I mean, hate is a strong word, but I just do not rate it at all. You know, to me, I would quite happily just do the blog, focus on SEO, and completely forget social media. For a time there, like Christina was a bit obsessed with Instagram, but we were actually talking about this last night because I was reading another blogger who we just collaborated with. She was talking about her addiction to Instagram and how it actually really derailed her life, even though she was traveling full time. So I think these things can do a lot of harm. And last night we said, well, our last Instagram post was actually November. So we're not really on our social media game, as it were. But at the same time, I'll put it like this. The way I see it is like SEO, people are, using Google, people are asking to come to your blog because it's like, they're searching things to do in Hanoi. You pop up on there, they're clicking there. Oh, okay, we'll visit your blog because we want to. To me, social media is the other way around, where you're there going, oh, please come and visit the blog. Look at this, look at this, look at it. And you're kind of, if you're just trying to use it to get traffic, you're sort of begging for traffic. And in our experience, a lot of the time you'll get well-meaning relatives and friends will be, liking your posts and leaving comments. But to get what you would call, real people that are interested in what you're writing, it is far better to go via the Google route and SEO. And then I think just added on to the back of that, then you can focus on your email list as well, which is, where you can provide real value to people.
It's really interesting because I've had now quite a number of travel bloggers on my show, and I have solo travel bloggers and I have couples like you and Christina, and I start to see a theme appearing. And I'm glad you brought up the word addiction, because I've recently been doing a lot of study on YouTubers who have gone through that whole burnout phase and who just have destroyed their lives because of the reliance on their audience to have content created, and this addiction that becomes part of, the egotistical journey as well, to say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing, watch me, look at what I'm doing. What I've got to ask somebody like yourself who, has gone through this evolution from when, blogging first started, how much does it distract from the actual enjoyment of the travel experience? And does it? Knowing that you have to focus on putting all this content together as a result of doing your trip?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and really valid, because I think, I guess one of our bugbears now, being kind of part of this world, this community for several years, and speaking to a lot of bloggers, I think there's this the sort of way that this is sold to people, let's say, you know, full-time travel or traveling for several months, and kind of starting a travel blog, just, you know, oh, anyone can start one, put a few posts on there, and then you'll make loads of money and you'll be able to, you know, go to any country you want to in the world. So I think there's a real kind of disconnection between the reality and the dream that is sold, like there is with a lot of things. And once you start traveling, you sort of see, well, really, you've got to balance this up somehow. So, I mean, I mentioned at the top of the show that we're on the coast of Spain. We've rented this apartment over the winter time, and then we're moving on to somewhere next week, which will be based there for about 5 weeks. So we're doing this on purpose so we can catch up with the freelance work, but also we've done, right now we're going through a complete audit of the blog, and we're actually going back through all these posts which we wrote when we were traveling in Southeast Asia, and now we realize how bad they are, and like kind of going and improving them. So we wrote them quickly at the time because we were traveling, we're on the road, and we didn't really have the time to do it. So I think if you do sort of want to do the whole travel blogging thing and you're going full time, I know it's different for different people, but for us personally, I know we have to sort of really try and balance this out and actually not just travel every second day and keep moving on. That doesn't really work for us. So we would want to like stay somewhere for a week, get through some content, and then, you know, move on for a few days.
Do you think this whole notion of influencers and all these other labels that are coming out there have been something that's been detrimental to people's enjoyment of travel in particular, where it's all about, you know, look at me standing on this temple and getting 1 million likes, and has it started to destroy the travel experience in some weird kind of way?
Yeah, I think you do. I mean, like, I'm a little bit allergic to the sort of tourist hotspots. I'll be honest, because I worked for 15 years as a tour guide in London, so I was like taking people around and kind of showing them the big sites all the time. So I'll do anything I can now to avoid the touristy areas. But sometimes when you go to these places, you really notice like the sheer volume of people that are trying to capture these selfies and these photos. And I mean, just smartphones in general, you know, people kind of sitting in amazing locations but just staring at their phones. So I think you're too focused on that, and I've caught myself doing it as well. You know, you're walking along somewhere and you're like, hey, that would make a great shot. And you know, I think it's kind of healthy if you go somewhere with a purpose of getting some great photos and some good photography for the blog. But when it just starts to be everybody, when everybody can be like a kind of Instagram star, then I think it ruins the entire experience, because then it's the taking photos of the food and then taking photos of the landmarks and, you know, all this kind of stuff. For me, maybe I'm a bit more old school, but I just think you should enjoy the experience for yourself. You don't need to share everything with everybody.
So do you and Christina take trips today where you don't engage your travel blog mentality at all? Like, you don't write about the place, you don't take photos of it to share. Particularly, you might take photos for your own purposes, but I guess what I'm asking is, have you got a stage where you can desanitize yourself in traveling to a location and not do it without having to be a travel blogger?
Yeah, it's kind of always with you, I guess. I mean, it becomes your life, but at the same time, yeah, it's only healthy that you should have these times where you say, okay, well, we'll leave the leave the smartphone at the hotel or something like that, and just go out and enjoy the experience. So a couple of months ago, we were in Bilbao, and
You're currently listening to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. If you like our show and you'd like to hear more of our episodes, after this one you can head over to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. You can also download our episodes from places like iTunes under the podcast section, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and a host of other locations that are all listed on our website. If you enjoy our content, why not tell a family member, a friend, or even a work colleague about it? We'd like to tell as many people around the world about the Global Travel Channel podcast show as possible. Now, why don't we get back to listening to this episode?
We did that kind of thing pretty much. I mean, we were going around and looking at the city, but we took one or two photos, but I just try and get my brain in a different place where you're kind of looking up and you're looking around at the buildings and the landscape, and you're like, yes, I am here. Because it's a very good point, because sometimes I think in Southeast Asia, I'm like looking back through these blogs now, and I'm like, wow, yeah, we went there. But at the time, you know, you're kind of, your head's in another place, which is a real shame that you're not enjoying the experience that you're having right there.
I'm really enjoying this conversation because, to be honest, this has gone in a different direction than I thought we would on the show, but I think it's really relevant because, as I said in the beginning, there's a lot of people that listen to the show and they're really interested about this whole notion of travel blogging, and you and Christina are travel bloggers who've gone through an evolution of your own life journey, but also the status of it. And I'm coming from an angle where I used to be in the corporate world at a global level, and I used to travel the world every day for my job, and I've been to more countries than most of these travel bloggers put together. But when I sit down and say, how much of those countries have I actually seen? Well, I saw a hotel, an airport, a boardroom, a meeting room, and maybe a nice restaurant that I went out for dinner, and then I left the country again, right? So it's a different perspective on traveling, as I also see a lot of these travel bloggers where they go somewhere and they might go to one particular location, they write about it, they take 100 photographs, and then they're out of the country the next day and they say, oh, I've been to China. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like...
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of this whole, and this is what I think you were alluding to in terms of everybody can be a photographer today because we've got a camera in our smartphone. But what's actually behind the lens? What's going on? How deep are we actually having this travel experience? And I can talk to a lot of these travel bloggers and say, well, you went to X and X country. Did you go to this place? Oh, no, I didn't have time to go to that place. I was only there on assignment for a tourist office or blah, 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 and I was out in 3 days, right?
Yeah, I was going to mention actually press trips.
Yes,
or,
please do.
You know, they sort of, well, they have different names, but essentially, like if a destination or a hotel or whatever is... well, often people don't get paid for these sort of things. I think when you first start travel blogging, you're like, wow, that's amazing. You know, this is the whole thing that is sold to you that, well, you can travel for free because places will give you free meals and free accommodation and all this kind of thing. And I've got to say, actually, between us, we've never been on a press trip. We have never... we've never really been tempted, and we've never actively kind of been seeking them out. We've been offered one or two things, but I think when you're a kind of early blogger, you would be tempted to go along for them and not actually say, well, you know, I'm going to charge money, because it's your time as well that they're taking up. And then, like you just said, Mark, you kind of basically get whizzed around from the airport to the hotel to a fancy restaurant they want to show off. And yeah, to me, it just seems a bit pointless. You know, I think if I want to travel somewhere, I want to at least have the ability to relax there and to enjoy it and to travel slower. And I think from the early days of our blog, we realized we were what you could call classified, you know, slow travelers, I guess, that we weren't really into this kind of rushing thing. And I think that's okay. You know, I think more people need to say that well, it's okay to not, you know, go and see absolutely everything on a hectic schedule. You're better off to see one or two things, but really enjoy them and really understand them, and do it that way. So, there's nothing wrong with slow traveling, and I think over a longer time span, the quality content and the quality experiences are going to beat the kind of cheap and quick stuff.
I am starting to see this as a trend too in travel bloggers that I speak to on the show, is that the desire to keep up the pace of getting around the world and going to more and more countries is dropping off quite rapidly. And I'm seeing a lot of people now saying, you know, we want to slow down. We want to be in one location for a number of months, and, you know, we want to spend time in that location doing stuff. So my next question is going to be around your relationship with Christina in regards to this whole travel blogging. How has traveling together impacted your relationship because you do this travel blogging?
I guess it's sort of hard to say, because it's like, well, how would it be compared to if we didn't do it? And I don't know, because we are doing it. So,
well, I guess I'm coming from the point of view, if you and Christina were getting up every day and heading off to an office in London and doing your separate jobs and all the rest of it, versus being on the road together every day, 24/7, creating this content that's going out there to the world, and having, I guess, a responsibility within the relationship to uphold your end of delivering certain amount of this content. It must have some kind of, and I'm not looking at this from a negative perspective, I'm interested to know, as I'm sure my listeners are, how does a couple work through this together? You know, what are some of the challenges with it?
So how many arguments a day are we having? Well, it's I can't give you an exact statistic, but I've got the book here.
Is it far more enjoyable because you're doing it with your partner, or do you see also the benefits of someone traveling around the world alone doing travel blogging?
Yeah, I think it's very much down to individual tastes. It would be, I mean, I guess the perception is, yeah, travel bloggers, that's people in their 20s, maybe 30s, you know, before they've kind of got married and settled down. But these days, I mean, you get family bloggers and couple bloggers. I mean, for us personally, we had that kind of 9 to 5 life in London. And actually, I mean, I used to work some crazy hours because I worked for a tourist-based business just before we left London. And so a lot of the time I wouldn't even get weekends off, and the quality of life I had was absolutely rubbish. And then, you know, Christina was in a traditional 9 to 5 job, so we would see each other in the evenings, but we'd be worn out. And then, like I said previously, every opportunity we had to escape the city, we would, and we'd go on these kind of mini breaks. But then you've not really got enough time to enjoy it with a kind of weekend off and all that sort of thing. So just as we were winding down, I'd have to drive back to London and we'd start over again. So I think, I know that we were saying this to each other like last week, that we've now reached the point where we're both really happy. And it depends how you measure success, but I would say that we've actually achieved the kind of location independent lifestyle that we wanted. It's not everybody's idea of travel blogging, because, like I said, we're in an apartment for like 3 months here through the winter, but then we're going to go back into our camper van and we will travel around Europe across the summer. And I think it's just really healthy, because we've got a lot to look forward to in the future. You know, we don't know, I can't tell you where we're going to be in like May, June, July. I don't know really. You know, we've got a rough idea of the countries we want to visit. But excuse me, what we've decided to do this year is basically pick out some things that we've always wanted to visit. Like, they might be famous landmarks, or they might be just areas of a country, and head towards those and actually go and look at and go and visit the things that really interest us. And then when we write about those things, we're going to be very excited to do it. And we're not going to feel obliged to go to places just because, they're the most popular with other people, or we think we should write about them. Whereas when we first started, maybe our way was kind of like just to travel somewhere, and then we'd look at it, and even if we weren't that impressed with it, we would write about it because we'd been there. So we've kind of flipped that around. So now we're saying, well, let's follow our interests and go to the places we really want to. But it's become kind of much more really than just about the traveling and the seeing things and writing about those. It's become more about the lifestyle. So I think that can be an underrated part of it, that people focus on going 100 miles an hour. But for us, we're like, well, no, actually what we want to do is be going a bit slower and really enjoying it. So we had 2-3 amazing months there in the summer where we were just coming through France, and we were staying in all these tiny villages, like far away from the cities and even the bigger towns. And we just felt like we'd really experienced the countryside. And coming from England, you're always sort of under the impression that France is nothing special. But my God, like, we both really fell in love with it, We've never eaten so much amazing food, and then, there's amazing landscapes and very friendly people, and yeah, it's just incredible. But obviously, a lot of people say if you're a travel blogger, you're probably just going to hit Paris and write about the main things because they're the most popular. You can sell the tours off the back of those, you can get the traffic to the blog. But yeah, it's sort of become just more than, our life is about more than the blog, and you've got to balance it, and you've just got to remember that at times.
Yeah, I like your answer, because basically what you've come down to saying there is that because you're away from the normal 9 to 5, you've created a lifestyle where, one, you can be with the person that you want to be with a lot of the time, you can share in these experiences together, and you can choose basically where you want to go to do your next amount of work, whatever amount of work you want to put into that. That's called balance, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. And I think by doing that, you have a happier life, and you've got a healthier relationship, because you're not under the kind of pressures of the 9 to 5, of other people's agendas and working, etc. So once you get away from that, then you can just both sit down and say, well, what is it that we want to do? And then focus on that. And I think with travel blogging, there is a fine line. You've got to just kind of take stock every now and again and say, oh, is this really what we want to do? Because all it takes is one exciting email to come in to the inbox with an opportunity which pulls you away from where you were heading, because there's some money involved, or there's some, like a press trip or whatever, like we were talking about, and then that kind of derails the whole thing that you were going for. So you've got to be really strong and kind of, stick on your path.
So I ask a lot of the other travel bloggers that I have on the show, where do you see yourselves in 5 years from now with all this, with this lifestyle, with this journey, with the blogging? Where's it going to for you two?
Oh, that's a lot. I feel like I'm at a job interview now. So in 5 years, 5 years, I'll own this podcast. No, seriously. I think in 5 years, the vision that we've got is to have at least one property. So to have a base where we can come back to at any time we choose, and then so have a lifestyle of travel, but have at least one base. 2 would be ideal. So let's say, an apartment in Bangkok and like a bayside like house in Montenegro, for example. Is it things we've been really seriously thinking about? So have these places as somewhere to stay, and they're our actual homes. So you've got some kind of anchor, and then just keep on exploring and keep on traveling around the world.
How do you think all this travel that you've done since you really started out on this journey, how do you think it's changed you as an individual?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've always been like fairly open and kind of friendly. So any job that I've done, I've tried to sort of include everybody and that kind of thing. So yeah, in that way, I think sort of traveling wises you up a little bit to the world, but yeah, I don't sort of buy into this whole thing that it really fundamentally changes who you are. If you, I know this is probably not what a lot of people want to hear, but I don't know. If you're an idiot at home, you're an idiot abroad. So to me, it's you are who you are, and I think it can give you a different perspective. Obviously, there's a common thing people say where if you just read the news in your home country, you're getting a tiny slice of the world. So once you do get out there and you meet people, like nothing's as bad as it seems. So I think from that point of view, yeah, in terms of sort of confidence and feeling that you can just get up and you can do the things that you want to do, yeah, it gives you that boost, definitely.
What makes you the happiest when you travel?
Just the feeling of freedom, really. I think it's just that sort of if you're out, in the mountains, walking along the beach, this kind of thing of just being out in nature and just free to roam. Yeah, I think it's something quite primitive that I've got. Not everybody feels like that. Obviously, some people prefer the cities, etc. But yeah, I think when I'm traveling, it is literally the act of moving moving somewhere else and kind of just heading off into the unknown.
What frightens you the most that you see going on in other countries that you visit?
Um, I think it's. I tell you what's really scary is like how similar how similar everybody is around the world. And there are cultural differences. But I think the scariest thing is when you start realizing some of the sort of bad things that happen in the world just happen everywhere. And they happen in countries where you think, oh, okay, well, maybe that's what we would call a developed, civilized Western country. And then you go to somewhere that's a little bit more wild, and you're like, well, no, this stuff is going on back home as well. And yeah, so I think it's kind of scary once you start realizing that, and the global scale of some things like I don't want to end on a bad note, but like things like human trafficking and etc. You realize like the sort of the global problem that is.
Hmm. Is the whole philosophy of sustainable travel something that's on your and Christina's radar?
Sort of climate change, etc., being like constantly in the news, and it's obviously, over there in Australia, it's front and center with what's going on in the natural world, and then a lot of beaches we've been to, you see sort of plastic floating around and etc. So I think it's constantly on your mind. What I would say is it's not a focus of what we're doing, and hopefully at a later date when I'd say we've become more established, because even now it feels like we're new to this whole travel blogging business, but we're a bit further down the road. I mean, that would be lovely if we sort of had a big enough business where we could start some kind of movement or like a charitable arm of the business. But definitely going forward through what we're doing on the blog, I think the best way to approach it is to bring in kind of guest writers who are more experts on this. I mean, I want our blog to be genuine, so there's no point in me sitting down going, oh, well, people shouldn't fly, people shouldn't do this or that, because I don't know enough about it. So I would rather get somebody that does to give us some content so that we can share that. So when people come to, because I realise it's a paradox of saying to people, oh, you can travel more. But alongside that, we need to put in that message of, well, you know, just think about it and do it sustainably. But it's I think it's a bit rich of some travel bloggers that or anybody that flies all over the world then turns around and says, oh, by the way, yeah, you shouldn't fly because it's it's bad. So
I've got a series of quick fire questions for you that you're only allowed to use 1 or 2 word answers. Okay, so let's go through this list and see how you go. What star sign are you?
Pisces. I had to think about that, didn't I?
Pisces.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
The fish.
What's your favourite snack food when you're travelling?
Oh, I absolutely love crisps. And sorry, 1 word answers. But I've got to say this. One of my favourite things, Christina thinks I'm weird, but I just love going into like the local shops, local supermarkets, and finding like the local crisps. Now, unfortunately, they're the same around the world a lot of the time. But when I was in Central America once, I found a packet of mayonnaise flavoured crisps, and I've never been able to find them again. But so I'm constantly on a quest to do that. But yeah, I like a good selection of crisps or chips, as they say in the US.
Well, I can tell you now that they have mayonnaise flavoured chips in Malaysia. So next time you're in Malaysia, make sure you get a packet. There you go.
I'm booking that flight.
Window or aisle seat, and why?
Oh, that's good one. It's got to be the window because I just love the view, unless you're over the wing. But I love looking down on the world when you're flying.
Yep. First thing you pack when you leave for a trip?
The adapter. Yeah, definitely. Adapter and charger.
Yeah. Favorite airline experience?
Or that is Turkish Airlines when we were living in Malta and we flew to Istanbul. We got randomly upgraded to business class, and it was only a 2-hour flight, but yeah, we had a lovely experience, some great food, and then we got like a minibus, our own minibus to the terminal. Brilliant.
Fantastic. 2 bucket list destinations that you haven't been to yet?
Ethiopia and too many. Chile.
Ethiopia and Chile.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. What's the worst habit Christina has when she's travelling?
You're really trying to end my marriage, aren't you? No, I don't know. I can't think of anything.
She doesn't have a bad habit?
Well, nothing that bad, no, that gets me, really. So.
Okay. So if I asked her the same question, what would she say about you, do you think?
Probably sneezing. I'd randomly sneeze, even when I'm not ill. So, yeah, it really upsets people, I think, because it's a very loud sneeze. So, it's bad.
Okay. A loud sneezer. Haven't come across too many of those in my life. And you'll be pleased to hear this is the last one on my list. If you hadn't chosen this path as a travel blogger, what do you think you'd be doing right now in your life?
Oh, well, the other dream career probably would have been a radio host.
Radio host, there you go. At a children's hospital.
Well, hopefully I'd have moved on to paid work, but yeah.
Fantastic. So you guys are moving on and you're going to be back in the van for summertime. Whereabouts are you heading to?
Yeah, absolutely. So the middle of March we will we'll be in Andalusia, so we're going to head then into Portugal and then back into Spain. So yeah, just take it easy. I think we'll be back in the UK, then maybe coming over to the Netherlands and then going up into the Scandinavian countries. So we're definitely keen to explore there in a van we've seen so many lovely shots of Norway, etc. So, can't wait.
Listen, I'd like to invite you back on the show after summer so you can talk to us about those trips in particular. I know we got onto a lot of the things around the whole travel blog lifestyle today, and I think it was really good because people are hungry for that kind of information who are interested in getting into travel blogging. So I'm sure you've answered a lot of the questions people were looking for, but maybe when you come back next time we can talk about, those travel experiences and van life around Europe this summertime. Would you be happy to do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's it. And as long as I'll go with my philosophy of enjoying the moment, and I'll let you know how it goes.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Charlie Stamp, it's been amazing having you on the Global Travel Channel podcast show today. Thanks very much for suffering through with your cough, and I'm going to let you go now and get a hot cup of tea so you can rest your larynx out a little bit more today over there in Spain.
Sounds perfect. Thank you for having me on, Mark. It has been a pleasure.
Thanks, man. There we go. That was Charlie Stamp talking to me from Spain today, even though he's from the UK. And he dedicated that episode to his wife Christina and his mother and father Brenda and John up there in Cambridgeshire in the UK. Hope you're having a lovely day up there, even though it's probably raining. I had to say that. Okay, so that's it for this episode. Charlie, thanks very much again for coming on the show. There were some great insights there to the world of travel blogging and all the things that have been happening to you and Christina along the way. If you'd like to check out more episodes from the Global Travel Channel podcast show, head on over to our website, www.globaltravelchannel.com. There's lots of amazing and inspiring travel stories there to be listened to. If you want to download them and listen to them later on, you can do so from places like Apple iTunes under the podcast section. Go to Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and all these are listed there on our website, even including our Patreon page. So if you want to support the production and ongoing sustainability of this podcast show, then your contributions via our Patreon page are very greatly appreciated. Now, if you enjoyed today's show, why don't you tell somebody else about the show? Because we're trying to get our listenership up around the world. Friends, family members, work colleagues, anybody you come across in the street, tell them about the Global Travel Channel podcast show. Okay, it's time for me to get out of here. My name's Mark Philpott, and until we meet next time, I wish you all a happy and safe bon voyage.